Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about an HOA that laid pipes through my private land. I woke up to the throaty clatter of heavy machinery nosing around my lilac bushes, the kind of low-pitched growl an excavator makes when it's already halfway through a job. At first I thought my phone's white noise app had glitched itself into some bizarre industrial remix, but an aftershock shuddered through the floorboards and rattled the coffee mugs hanging over the island. That was real. When I yanked open the blinds, I saw a bright orange mini excavator straddling the property line like a giant, ignorant grasshopper, its bucket scooping perfect C-shaped bites out of my meadow. A line of PVC pipe, white, new, and absolutely unwelcome, unfurled behind it like the world's tackiest ribbon. 5 neon-vested workers paced beside the trench, passing joints of pipe down the ditch in an assembly line rhythm that looked practiced and permanent. I'm Ivy, a piano teacher turned reluctant land use nerd, courtesy of the 2¼ wooded acres my grandma left me. Those trees and the uphill pasture are more than a postage stamp hobby farm. They're my retirement plan and the last green buffer against the subdivision that's crept closer year by year. Before sunrise that morning, the pasture had been intact. By 7:15 a.m., someone else's septic drain field, a whole HOA's worth, was worming through my soil like it paid rent. I slammed into my boots, grabbed my phone, and marched outside in my ancient blue robe. My driveway smelled of diesel and fresh-cut clay. The crew foreman, a square-shouldered guy with an impressive mustache and a clipboard, blinked at me as though I were the unexpected wildlife. "Whoa, ma'am, watch your step, active dig zone." "This is my land," I barked, pointing at the freshly painted fluorescent survey marks. "Who sent you?" "The Ridgemont Highlands HOA," he replied matter-of-factly, tapping the logo on his clipboard. "We've got authorization to lay a common septic outflow line. Easement paperwork's all signed." "By whom? Because it sure wasn't me." He shrugged, but I caught the tiniest eye dart, right past me toward the cul-de-sac that separated my place from the cookie-cutter rooftops. Standing there, hands on hips like a conquering general, was Byron, the HOA president I'd met exactly once at a zoning hearing. Byron had the forced smile of someone who wanted you to notice how absolutely calm he was about taking something you loved. He cupped his hands. "Morning, Ivy. Thought we'd knock this out while the weather's good. Don't worry, the landscaping crew will tidy your side when we're done." Landscaping crew? My eye twitched hard enough to count as Morse code for lawsuit. I snapped photos of everything. Tire tracks grinding through my orchard grass, workers setting pipe, the trench itself. I zoomed in on the mile marker stamp on each pipe segment. Anything to prove date, time, and specific materials. Meanwhile, I dialed county planning. The receptionist transferred me 3 times before I reached someone who could interpret parcel maps. Turns out no easement had been recorded for my land in more than 40 years. Next call, local police. The dispatcher, bless her by-the-book heart, promised to send an officer to maintain the peace and verify property lines. Translation, maybe they'd stop it. Maybe they'd just make a report. Either way, uniform presence beats screaming into the wind. Officer Larkin arrived in under 10 minutes, lights off but presence undeniable. He stepped from his cruiser, one hand resting on the top edge of the open door in that patrol car lean you see in daytime cop shows. I briefed him while Byron hovered, all neighborly calm. "Sir, this is civil," Byron insisted. "We have legal documentation." "Great," Larkin said, flipping open his notebook. "Let's see the signed easement." Byron's smile faltered. "Our attorney has it. I can email—" "You've already broken ground on someone else's parcel," Larkin cut in. "Email won't cut it." He radioed dispatch for county code enforcement, then walked the trench himself, measuring distance from the known iron stake at my northeast corner. By the time he finished, the crew had idled the excavator, waiting for instructions. Without a valid easement, Larkin said, the work had to halt. I thought that would be enough, but Byron's phone rang. He turned away to whisper, then came back with fresh arrogance. "Our civil engineer says the easement predates her purchase, implied and irrevocable." Larkin, patient but unimpressed, asked the engineer's name, license number, and firm address. Byron fumbled. The foreman shifted from boot to boot, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. That's when my neighbor Arlen jogged over from his backyard, camera already rolling. He's a retired surveyor with an encyclopedic knowledge of old plats. "Implied? Ridgemont didn't exist when this land was subdivided," he said, panning his phone to capture GPS coordinates. "You'd need a recorded grant or condemnation order, neither of which show in county records." Byron's ears flamed pink. "We don't have time for amateur arguments. The concrete trucks are scheduled for tomorrow." "Cancel them," Officer Larkin deadpanned. Predictably, Byron tried a last-ditch guilt trip, claiming the line served 42 families, and any delay meant raw sewage would keep pooling near their playground. I was sorry their system failed, but sorry didn't equal surrendering acreage without compensation or consent. Larkin radioed the on-call county environmental inspector, who arrived with surprising speed. The inspector eyed the pipe, flipped through his codebook, and wrote a stop work notice that he zip-tied to the excavator's joystick. Then he reached into his truck, pulled out a rigid frame clamp, and capped the exposed end of pipe, effectively blocking flow before it ever began. Byron protested until the inspector explained, politely but firmly, that discharging effluent without a permitted line is a misdemeanor under state sanitation law. Any attempt to connect the HOA's tanks to that pipe now constituted criminal pollution. Byron shut up. The crew packed up their tools, leaving the trench like a scar across my land. They'd be back, they muttered, once the paperwork was cleared up. When the last diesel engine rumbled away, I stood on my torn pasture and breathed the kind of shaky breath you take after avoiding a collision. But the collision wasn't avoided, just paused. The HOA had money, lawyers, and a clubhouse full of homeowners who probably believed I was the villain keeping them ankle-deep in sludge. That afternoon, Arlen brought over printouts of archived plat maps, some dated before Ridgemont's existence. His wife, Nora, delivered a thermos of lemonade and sympathy, plus a spare copy of the state statutes on adverse possession and prescriptive easements. We built a timeline, highlighting every transaction involving my land back to the Great Depression. Not one clause hinted anyone could trench through it. Saturday evening, I emailed every document, photo, and video to a local property rights attorney, Miss Cypress, whose track record read like folklore among rural landowners. She replied at 9:03 p.m. "You have a solid trespass and conversion case. Monday morning we'll file for injunctive relief." I slept badly, replaying excavator noises in my head. At dawn I walked the trench again, phone poised. A pair of Ridgemont board members strolled the far edge, taking their own pictures. One wore loafers completely unfit for muddy clay. When he slipped, I couldn't help thinking karma occasionally works on discount time. Monday came. We filed. The emergency hearing set for Wednesday meant I had 2 days to gather more ammunition. Arlen testified he'd surveyed my boundaries himself 8 years ago, flagging the same iron stakes Officer Larkin cited. Nora dug up a homeowner newsletter where Byron bragged about routing the new outflow beneath unused acreage next door, as though my pasture were an abandoned lot. Tuesday night, a cardboard sign appeared on my mailbox, "Sell or sewage, your choice." I snapped a photo, pulled the sign, and added harassment to the growing stack of claims. Wednesday's hearing felt half courthouse, half theater. Ridgemont's attorney argued that the HOA's original developer reserved utility corridors in preliminary site plans. Our side produced the final plats, approved by county commissioners, showing those corridors ending at their boundary, not mine. The judge leaned forward, frowning at the mismatched diagrams like someone spotting a knockoff handbag in bright daylight. By the lunch break, Ridgemont offered to buy a permanent easement for $15 grand. My attorney slid the scribbled offer across the table to me. I wrote one word beneath it: no. The judge granted our injunction, ordering the HOA to stop all construction, restore the land, and appear for a full damages trial in 6 weeks. On the courthouse steps, Byron muttered, "You're holding 42 families hostage." I replied, "You could have asked first." While Ridgemont scrambled for alternative engineering plans, I visited their existing septic field with the county inspector. Turns out poor maintenance, not capacity, caused most problems. The inspector cited them for failing to pump tanks on schedule. Suddenly, the outrage looked less noble and more negligent. Over the next month, tensions spiked. Someone left a stack of decaying pipe segments at my gate. Kids from the subdivision shouted, "Pipe witch," when I drove by. But something else happened too. A handful of Ridgemont residents knocked on my door, embarrassed, explaining they'd never voted on Byron's trenching scheme. They wanted peace, and their dues were skyrocketing to cover legal fees. One evening, a woman named Tara handed me a folder of board meeting minutes, marked "Confidential." Inside, I found lines proving Byron had skipped quorum rules and green-lit the trench during a secret session. Even better, a contractor's invoice showed he'd advance paid for the job using HOA reserve funds without homeowner approval, potentially embezzlement under state nonprofit statutes. When trial day arrived, our evidence fire-hosed the courtroom. Trespass, conversion, property damage, harassment, and violation of nonprofit governance laws hit the record like pins in a bowling alley. The jury didn't even need the full afternoon. They awarded me triple the restoration cost plus punitive damages sufficient to deter future misconduct. Total, a number that turned Byron's face ashen. But money wasn't the part that made me exhale. The court also ordered Ridgemont to remove every inch of pipe, remediate the soil, reseed the pasture, and, pending a separate civil action, elect a new board under court supervision. Byron tried to resign on the spot. The judge kept him in place long enough to oversee cleanup, calling it poetic accountability. Watching that same excavator return, this time gingerly lifting pipe out instead of burying it, felt surreal. Officer Larkin swung by on patrol, tipped his hat and said, "Guess they found the paperwork after all?" I spent the next weeks overseeing soil replacement and reseeding. Arlen and Nora brought seedlings to replace saplings crushed by the trench. Ridgemont homeowners voted in a fresh board that vowed transparency. Several neighbors sent apology notes, one even slipping in a bag of heirloom tomato starts. The settlement money paid for a new barn roof and a conservation easement ensuring no one, not even me, could subdivide the meadow in the future. My pasture would stay just that. Mine, green, quiet, and safe from rogue sewer lines. And that, incredibly, was only the beginning of the dominoes. By the time the last section of pipe left my field, spring had rolled into full soundtrack, peepers chirping at dusk, tractor engines tuning up in distant barns, and the low-key hum of Ridgemont gossip growing louder than either. I figured removing the illegal sewer line would close the chapter, but instead it cracked the cover on a messier sequel. First surprise, a certified letter from Ridgemont's insurance carrier. The HOA had filed a claim, blaming the unauthorized trench on contractor error, and arguing I shared liability because I failed to provide timely notice of the encroachment. I laughed hard enough to scare my chickens. My attorney laughed too, then drafted a response citing the trespass verdict. Liability settled, period. Still, insurance adjusters love to dig for shared fault the way raccoons dig through compost, so I prepared for more paperwork. Second surprise, nightly drive-bys. A black SUV with dealership plates cruised the gravel lane behind my pasture at odd hours, headlights dark, rolling slow enough that gravel barely crunched. I couldn't swear it was Byron, but the silhouette matched his broad-shouldered outline. I installed twin motion cameras on cedar posts, all infrared, all cloud syncing. Anyone wanting a second trench would need to audition for my private documentary first. Meanwhile, Ridgemont held a special election. Homeowners crammed their clubhouse, most wearing color-coded stickers. Green for replacing Byron immediately, yellow for keeping him through fiscal year-end. Residents live-blogged the vote on neighborhood apps. Tara texted me real-time updates. At 7:42 p.m., the Green faction won in a landslide. Byron's removal became effective at midnight. By dawn, for sale signs sprouted in his yard like mushrooms after rain. A rumor spread that he'd raided petty cash envelopes for legal photocopies, which turned out to fund a 3-night hotel stay during the trial. Misuse of HOA funds, in some states, constitutes criminal breach of fiduciary duty. County detectives began poking around, and Byron's once confident strut evaporated into a head-down shuffle whenever a cruiser idled near his curb. Most of that drama stayed on their side of the split-rail fence until a Tuesday in May, when I woke to find my well pump silent. No water hissed from the kitchen faucet. Pressure gauge, 0. I walked to the pump house expecting a tripped breaker. Instead, I found the pressure tank half unscrewed and wires yanked from the control box. Someone with basic mechanical sense and zero conscience had sabotaged the system. The sheriff's office sent Deputy Moreno, a forensic tech hybrid who photographed every footprint in the pump house clay. My camera footage caught only the tail end of the same black SUV at 3:13 a.m., spraying a rooster tail of gravel as it fled, plate unreadable. I handed Moreno the clip. She handed me a victim services brochure and promised extra patrols. I appreciated the gesture, but new rural patrol routes covered more miles than my car does between oil changes. While my plumber sourced replacement parts, I ferried jugs from Arlen's outdoor spigot and downed grim instant coffee brewed on bottled water. Revenge fantasies bubbled hotter than the kettle, but I stayed busy documenting every expense. Service call, replacement pump, hotel room for 2 nights because my well also feeds the bathroom. Each receipt fed a future damages ledger. I called my attorney and added vandalism to the civil suit, plus a heads up to detectives sniffing around Byron's finances. Motive matters. No sooner had the well saga settled than a certified envelope arrived from the county tax assessor. Ridgemont had petitioned to rezone my acreage as public utility easement and drainage corridor, claiming that future community wastewater projects required predictable future access. Clever. If successful, they could seize a strip through eminent domain at slashed valuation. In response, Miss Cypress filed an objection and requested a hearing. She also suggested bolstering my parcel's agricultural bona fides. Agland invites stricter scrutiny before rezoning. Enter my third surprise, pollinator habitat grants. Nora, a master gardener, told me the state offered micro-grants for native flower meadows that offset bee decline. Requirements: minimum half-acre, pesticide-free documented planting plan. Approved parcels gain an agricultural designation, and better yet, a protected ecological overlay that complicates utility corridors. A late-night rabbit hole later, I sketched a meadow plan with black-eyed Susans, milkweed, coneflower, and purple prairie clover. Grant application, submitted, seed mixes, ordered. I even found a local 4-H club eager to help broadcast seed in exchange for a field workshop. Momentum tasted as sweet as clover honey. Ridgemont's tax gambit hit the agenda of a June zoning commission meeting. I sat up front, notebook poised, wearing my best innocent land steward cardigan. Ridgemont's interim president, a cautious man named Felix, read a prepared statement claiming they now sought only preliminary discussion of utility expansion, not immediate rezoning. Commissioners side-eyed one another. No one likes their docket clogged by speculative power grabs. When my turn came, I presented the pollinator grant notification letter and a binder of USDA guidance showing native meadows reduce stormwater runoff. In other words, my field served water quality better than any trench of PVC ever could. The commission voted 5-0 to drop Ridgemont's petition without prejudice, meaning they could refile someday, but only with fresh evidence and application fees. Felix thanked them meekly, then hurried out before local reporters could corner him. I stayed to chat with a journalist who covered land use spats. She loved the David versus HOA angle, especially the documented sabotage of my well. Her eventual article painted Ridgemont leadership as reckless stewards of homeowner dues. The comment section lit up with residents nationwide sharing similar horror stories, and my inbox flooded with sympathy and a dozen more pollinator seed suggestions. July arrived with heat waves and the mailed decision from the insurance adjuster. Ridgemont's carrier denied their claim, citing the court's judgment and lack of policy coverage for intentional trespass. The HOA now owed my full damages personally, no insurer rescue net. Homeowners started asking where next year's pool maintenance fund would come from. Around that time, Deputy Moreno called. Detectives had matched tire impressions near my pump house to Byron's leased SUV. Lease company records placed the vehicle in his possession the night of sabotage. The DA filed charges, felony malicious mischief and misdemeanor tampering with a water system. Byron was booked, posted bail, and soon bore the ankle monitor badge of poor choice infamy. Ridgemont's new board voted to forbid him from common areas to reduce liability exposure. Poetic, if not quite symphonic. Still, I didn't trust fortune to keep my fences intact. I upgraded the gate with a keypad lock and hired Quinn, an electrician friend, to wire motion-activated floodlights tied to a siren that bleated like a startled goat. The first night it went off, false alarm triggered by a wandering doe. I bolted upright and nearly tripped over my bassoon case before realizing no intruders trudged across alfalfa. Heart racing, I laughed at myself and went back to bed. The doe visited nightly afterward. I named her Side Quest. August harvest of early peaches gave me an idea. I prepped a table at Ridgemont's community yard sale, loaded with fruit baskets and jars of my own honey. A chalkboard sign read, "Proceeds benefit well repair legal fund. Thanks, neighbors." The passive-aggressive sting registered on faces of those who had once called me pipe witch, but many residents purchased anyway, maybe to soothe consciences, or maybe because the peaches were genuinely good. Over 2 Saturdays, I collected enough small bill donations to offset half the pump house repair costs. Victories come in luscious, fuzzy packages sometimes. Court dates multiplied. Byron's criminal arraignment set for September. Ridgemont's appeal of the damages award set for October. My pollinator grant site inspection scheduled between them. Life turned into a chessboard with overlapping timers. The inspector arrived on a blazing Thursday morning, clipboard in hand, sweat darkening his collar. He trudged the meadow perimeter, counting flagged species and photographing blooms. SideQuest the doe chose that moment to appear, delicately nibbling milkweed pods like a mascot. The inspector's grin suggested bonus points for charismatic megafauna. He approved the grant on the spot, promising a reimbursement check within 30 days. 3 days later, a utility locate crew painted neon orange dashed lines along Ridgemont's side of the fence. Tara texted, "Rumor, contractor to reroute septic entirely within HOA boundary. Costs ballooning." I glanced at the lines, noted how they snaked perilously close to Ridgemont's playground, and realized their quiet desperation. Any reroute required lifting half their asphalt walking path. Asphalt removal, repour, and landscaping regrade? Pricey. Their board minutes, published online, revealed a special assessment proposal, $4,800 per household. Angry emojis peppered the comment thread. Byron's criminal case hit the docket first, I testified, describing the bone-dry tap, the shredded wiring. Moreno presented photos and the tire match report. Byron's defense, no proof he drove the SUV that night, collapsed under cell tower pings, placing his phone at my lane. Precisely 3:11 a.m. jury returned guilty on both counts. Sentencing, 6 months home detention, 2 years probation, restitution for well repairs, and mandatory anger management classes. The ankle monitor remained, humming data into the cloud 24/7. Immediately after sentencing, Ridgemont's civil appeal arrived in Superior Court. Their lawyer argued triple damages were excessive. Our side counter-argued that damages barely scratched potential meadow restoration costs had effluent leaked. The judge asked one question: did the HOA knowingly continue trenching after being told no easement existed? Lawyer squirmed. Answer: yes. Appeal denied. Days grew shorter, but the plot kept stretching its legs. With grant money in hand, I hosted a meadow reveal picnic. Neighbors from both sides attended, some wary, most curious. Children chased butterflies while parents sipped lemonade brewed in water now flowing crystal clear from my thoroughly repaired well. Felix approached, hat literally in hand, and apologized for the HOA's past aggression. He handed me a printed resolution. Ridgemont formally surrendered any future claim to my parcel, promising to notify county offices accordingly. I accepted, but requested one addition. They'd sponsor an annual pollinator workshop open to all residents, using a slice of their clubhouse lawn for demonstration plots. Felix agreed, relief softening his shoulders. Winter tiptoed in early that year. Frost silvered seed heads across the meadow, turning every spent coneflower into a pewter statue. Courtrooms quieted, invoices settled. Byron's house finally sold, to a young couple who introduced themselves by asking which bird feeders attract goldfinches. I knew we'd get along. On the anniversary of the first illegal trench, I stood at the gate, watching sunrise ignite 1,000 frost crystals where sewer pipe once lay. I snapped a photo, added it to the courtroom montage I keep on a USB drive labeled Pasture Victory. Occasionally, I rewatch the footage. Excavator lifting pipe, bailiff reading verdict, Byron's SUV rolling off on a wrecker after missing lease payments. Not out of gloating, okay, maybe a smidge, but mostly as a reminder that inertia favors whoever dares move first. When someone bulldozes your boundary, respond with documentation, law, and enough stubbornness to outlast diesel fuel. Later that morning, I set the USB down, opened a fresh document, and began mapping a trail loop for future visitors to experience the meadow without trampling seedlings. Arlen offered to survey the path. Nora volunteered signage. SideQuest will likely supervise. Life hums forward, pipe-free and hopeful. Snow fell early, like the sky wanted to seal everything under a neutral white truce. Ridgemont's rooftops vanished beneath powder, and my meadow frosted into a quilt of seed heads glittering like tiny lanterns. I thought winter might finally hush the saga, but drama refuses to hibernate when money is still at stake. It began with a knock on my door 2 weeks before New Year's. A woman introduced herself as Candace, escrow officer for a regional land development firm I'd never heard of. She held a folder thick with earnest money forms and a non-binding letter of intent, offering to buy my entire acreage at a price double county valuation, provided I signed before year-end. Flattering, but absurd. I asked what the buyer planned to build. She said, "Future utility park," as if that were a novel attraction. I declined, politely. She left a business card anyway, mentioning the offer factored in hardship from recent litigation. The attempt to spin my own victory into distress tickled me so much I nearly framed the card. That night, Tara texted screenshots from Ridgemont's private forum. Rumor that a developer would acquire my land, lay a modern wastewater treatment plant, and grant residents free hookups for life. Felix posted a public denial, but speculation spread faster than holiday lights. Someone uploaded a mock site plan overlaying my meadow with concrete tanks shaped like cartoon hearts, an attempt at humor that still smelled like sewage. Miss Cypress requested a background check on the mysterious firm. Results pinged in before dawn. Shell subsidiary, recently incorporated, registered agent matching the original Ridgemont developer's address. In other words, old puppeteer, new puppet. We drafted a cease and desist letter warning against further purchase solicitations. While that simmered, I turned to happier work, teaching winter piano workshops. One icy afternoon, my teenage student Marisol hesitated at the door. "Is it okay if my mom parks by the gate?" she asked. Some man waved her away last week. My pulse spiked. I reviewed camera footage later and spotted a stocky figure in a parka directing cars to keep the lane clear. Face obscured, but SUV tires identical to those used by a local property security outfit. Hired intimidation, subtle but illegal. Deputy Moreno advised logging every incident. She hinted the DA might add witness intimidation to Byron's probation docket if the hire traced back to him. Motivation puzzled me. Byron had sold his house and theoretically lost interest, unless he cut a deal with the developer to rehab his reputation by delivering my land on a silver platter. January thaw brought a court notice. Ridgemont homeowners filed a derivative suit against Byron and two former board allies, seeking repayment of legal fees and special assessment refunds. I wasn't a party, but depositions promised fresh nuggets. During discovery, Byron's email archive revealed he'd cultivated a relationship with that shell developer long before the trenching fiasco, floating the idea of a public-private wastewater upgrade that hinged on acquiring adjacent unused acreage. There, black and white, he'd called my meadow a soft target due to single ownership. I forwarded the line to Miss Cypress. She sent it to the homeowner's attorney, who sent it to local press. Headlines erupted. Former HOA president called neighbor's land soft target. Byron's name became shorthand for entitled overreach. Even folks outside our county recognized it. One talk radio host riffed for 10 joyous minutes about how some people treat private property like a communal dumpster. During all this, I nurtured seeds under grow lights, prepping for spring transplant. Tending baby plants steadied my nerves better than tea. Still, every time headlights swept my window after midnight, I rolled out of bed, checked monitors, and counted my chickens, literally. I half expected someone to slash fencing or dump trash in retaliation. Thankfully, winter kept even vandals indoors. February delivered a letter from the state attorney general's office. They'd opened an inquiry into the shell developer's licensing paperwork, suspecting fraudulent intent to circumvent environmental review. I sent them everything: Candace's glossy folder, email screenshots, the bogus site plan shaped like hearts. The investigator replied that fraudulent filings carry hefty fines and possible license revocation. Sometimes the wheel of justice turns because citizens keep adding grease. Snow melted, sap ran, and the biggest surprise yet stepped onto my porch: Felix and two new board members, holding a bakery box trio of apple cider donuts as peace tokens. They asked if we could discuss drainage, runoff, and cooperation. I invited them in, coffee brewing. Over mugs, Felix admitted the HOA faced six-figure attorney invoices and a looming special assessment revolt. Rather than chase fantasy projects, they wanted to partner on a shared gray water reed bed demonstration, entirely on HOA land, zero trenching on mine. They offered to fund signage highlighting the meadow's role in water filtration, framing my property as community benefit green space. I asked hard questions. Where's the money coming from? Are homeowners voting on it? Who designs and maintains the beds? Felix slid a draft budget and a signed resolution showing 78% affirmative ballots. Color me impressed. But trust, once cracked, requires epoxy layers. I said I'd consider after seeing final engineering diagrams and a binding covenant that my land stays untouched. We shook hands, donut glaze sticking to fingers like provisional glue. March winds ushered in two courtroom finales. First, Byron's restitution hearing. The judge set exact repayment schedules covering my well repairs, vandalism-related hotel stays, and an extra buffer for emotional distress. Byron's lawyer protested the distress figure. The judge replied that waking up to no water qualifies as non-trivial mental duress. Checkmate. Second, Ridgemont homeowners versus Byron. Verdict: Byron and his cronies breached fiduciary duty, must repay HOA's litigation costs, plus a 5-year ban from serving on any homeowner's board statewide. A marshal served the order as Byron exited the courthouse, ankle monitor chirping like a guilty cricket. Public shaming wrapped in legal bow. Spring exploded in green. My meadow filled with goldfinches darting between black-eyed Susan sprouts. Side quest returned, this time with twin fawns. Filming them nibble tender clover reminded me why I fought so hard for these 2¼ acres. Not merely asset value, but living promise. In April, the state pollinator grant director emailed asking if I'd host a regional workshop. They loved the HOA partnership angle, turning conflict into cooperative stewardship. I agreed, seeing a chance to cement goodwill and maybe nudge other neighborhoods away from bulldozer diplomacy. The workshop date, mid-May, dawned bright. Volunteers erected tents on HOA grass, arrow signs guiding guests through the reed bed demo, then across the fence to my meadow trail. I spoke first, sharing the saga minus courtroom minutia, focusing instead on negotiation lessons. Document everything, use statuesque patience, never assume silence means consent. Applause warmed me better than sunlight. Late afternoon, I noticed a familiar SUV idling beyond the HOA parking lot. Byron, monitor removed post-probation, leaned against the hood, arms crossed, watching families wander between purple prairie clover patches. No confrontation, just a silent spectator to the positive ripple he once fought. Our eyes met. I nodded, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement that his chapter closed here. He climbed back into the SUV and drove off. Tires whisper quiet for the first time. 2 weeks later, a certified envelope reached my mailbox. Noticed that the shell developer had withdrawn all purchase attempts and dissolved the subsidiary. The state's inquiry concluded with fines and a 1-year license suspension. Candace's card now hangs on my fridge, sarcastic souvenir. Friends, thank you. See you soon.